I'd like the panelists to introduce themselves and how they enter into this discussion of privacy and security, knowing, as I said, that privacy and security are two very different things, and maybe not everybody has something to say about both subjects. But please, Derek, introduce yourself and where your organization touches this conversation and what your organization's and maybe even your own personal perspective is on this subject.
Sure, thanks, Roger. Derek Kuhn from QNX Software Systems. QNX provides a platform for multiple different systems in the car. Infotainment, telematics, advanced driver safety systems, digital instrument clusters. Like you said, security and privacy are very different things. From a software perspective, we always think of security as a process, right? It's not just a feature or something you turn on. It's how that system is actually designed. You also have to think of how that system is connected, right? We're at the Connected Car Conference, so that plays a big role.
For people who don't know QNX, you might want to explain that automotive is just one piece of your business. You're also in industrial automation and aerospace.
Absolutely, medical devices. Really throughout any of the embedded market, you'll find QNX playing a prevalent role in multiple different verticals. I think you approach those differently, even on the defense side. Obviously, there are defense-related activities that QNX provides a platform for, which are extremely locked down and secure. You pay a price for that kind of security in certain circumstances because of the way it's architected, in terms of how it performs. But there are ways in which you can actually address both pieces.
Now, what's your perspective when you hear these stories? And I want to get the other perspectives, but I just wanted to get yours on this. So I've heard about people penetrating cars through the RDS-TMC traffic signal or through the tire pressure monitor. I mean, almost every month there's another university group of people that have, found another avenue into the car. How do you cope with that? How much of that is real?
It's an excellent question. I mean, I think what we need to realize is that the actual inherent design of the systems is not necessarily designed to be locked down in the way we might think of it needing to be. So there's no doubt that things need to change. There's also certain hurdles that need to be overcome by someone who wants to hack through in terms of understanding the vehicle architecture and what that means. It's a complex problem that definitely will require some...
One more question for you before I go to David, who also has a perspective on security, I think. If I were to ask you what is the threat level, green, yellow, or red, with obvious connotations for both in terms of red being most extreme, don't drive your car, green, you had nothing to worry about.
David?
Come on, threat level.
I'd give it a yellow. I have been accused by certain people in the analyst industry for potentially being a little bit more on the red side.
I'm hearing red when you say yellow.
I'm going with yellow today, Roger. David?
Okay. All right, David. Please introduce your organization and what you do in that organization, what your perspective is on this discussion.
So my name is David Miller. I'm the Chief Security Officer for a company called Covisint, which some people may know here because we do a lot of things in connected vehicle. Although we don't like thinking about it as connected vehicle, we like thinking of it as connected owner. It's really the owner of the vehicle that we provide connectivity to. It happens to be the vehicle that is one of the things that they're connected to.
Can everybody hear David?
Try this. There you go. All right, now you can hear me? So Dave Miller, a company called Covisint, right? We look at things at least a little differently. We provide connectivity platforms in the cloud for several OEMs, but we really think of it as connected owner. It's really the owner that is connected. The vehicle is a connection point, but it's the owner that is really the thing that is connected most, in most cases to their their life. And much like others here, we do other verticals, right? We also do healthcare. We connect physicians to healthcare records. So this idea of privacy and security is important. One of the things that I think people need to understand, kind of definitions, and to Roger's point about it being different things, security is about keeping people out. Privacy is about letting the right people in. That's what the difference is, right? So as the chief security officer of the company, the best, most secure system in the world is the one that's completely unavailable. Every time the system goes down, I'm like, well, I know we're secure, right? But privacy is actually about being able to share that information, being able to get that information out, right? I think the problem with your green, yellow, red question is you only gave me 3 possible ansers.
Sorry.
Right? Even
That's how we play the game.
Even Homeland Security had amber and orange and all kinds of other things.
We have mauve, teal.
Yeah. So I think if you're looking at security, and I want to answer it 2 ways because it's 2 different things.
Are you kept awake at night? Okay, how's that?
Security for connected vehicle is green. Privacy is yellow. All right. So, and that's 2 different, right? The security is somebody, because I have a connected car, going to be able to connect to me and slam on my brakes. Now, the odds of that happening are unbelievably difficult. My guess is if they can find a way to connect to my air pressure sensor while I'm moving down the expressway, I'd notice it. So I won't really worry that much about hacking through that. Privacy, on the other hand, which is there more information that the car is collecting about my activity and sharing it with people that I'm not sure who it is? Yeah, that happens today, right? The OEMs monitor all of these vehicles, and they're very, very open about the fact that this is not your data, this is their data to use as they please in a trustworthy way. And that, I think, becomes the big issue.
Now, wait a minute. The cars are very secure. I've heard this story before. You're the one who told me about all you need to hack a car is the VIN number.
So, yeah, so all you but it's
Hot seat.
safety. So with the VIN number and the right amount of information, I can probably go through a process, right, where
Okay,
with other
we're in
things,
yellow
I could,
now.
I could maybe remotely start your car. I could maybe unlock it. Again, right, coming from the security background, right, hackers aren't stupid. If you really want to remotely hack a vehicle so you can unlock the doors, right? Everybody has these remotes that are wireless. Those are unbelievably easy to hack. I don't know why you would try to go into the cloud and do the other hack. So you can do it, but I just really don't think it is the connectivity that is causing the security issue. I still think it's green. Maybe it's green going to yellow. What is green and yellow together?
I think we're in yellow. I don't think we're in green. I may not be waking up at night, but I'm a little bit concerned.
Well, we do have a panel on it, so I guess there is some concern.
I hope so. Okay. Rajesh, please introduce yourself and your organization and your perspective on this subject.
Sure. So my name is Rajesh Khandelwal. I'm with Harman International. For those of you who don't know who Harman is, so we are an infotainment unit and audio company. We provide the connected unit in the car for most major OEMs. We have the biggest market share in that space. With regards to security, I think before you design a system and try to make it secure, there is one thing. Security is something that you cannot bring in once the product is ready. Security is something that has to be part of your design process way from the beginning. You need to understand what your threat vectors are. You need to understand what assets you're trying to protect. And then you use a combination of hardware protection mechanism, software protection mechanism, some of the best practices in your software development lifecycle together, and that's how you engineer your secure systems. Back in January at CES, Harman introduced or announced our next generation scalable infotainment platform with security in mind. What it does is basically it uses a hypervisor solution that allows you to run 2 independent OSs on the same core. One OS could be QNX for car-centric functionality, which is very independent of your second OS, which could be for entertainment-centric functionality. And the communication between the two OSs is very, very secure. So that's yet another way of providing a security into the vehicle by keeping the entertainment portion of the stack very separate from the car-centric stack.
So I'm assuming that this development activity is intended to bring some kind of enhancement to the product you have in the field?
So we hope that the solution or platform will be released in the next couple of years. There are OEMs who are already implementing the solution in their future car models as early as 2016 models.
Now you play an interesting role in that you're controlling more or less the center stack in a lot of premium vehicles, and there's kind of a cottage industry out there of people who like to hack those systems. In fact, sometimes I find that OEMs, some of the guys I talk to at BMW or something, almost like to see that their systems are such an attractive target that people are spending hours trying to hack in there, and there are websites devoted to this.
That's a great point. What we also do is we have ethical hackers on our team, where we give them our connected head units and we challenge them to hack into our systems. We hire them for doing white box testing and black box testing. White box testing is where we give them the documentations and the design, and then they do the vulnerability assessment on our connected head units. Black box testing is like a traditional hacker, where they would come in without any documentation and trying to find holes in our connected platforms. So yes, we have hackers on our team, and we go through the process of identifying the bugs and fixing those bugs and make sure that the systems are as secure as they can be.
I'm just curious about people who are hacking it after it does get into the field. Is that an issue that surfaces at Stanford headquarters, or your clients are ringing up, hey, our system was penetrated, or they expect that to happen to some extent, or?
So the process there is, again, depending on the region, eventually the headquarters will get involved, but I think the first line of contact would be the engineering, and that's where they get involved. And quickly you have to identify what the issues are, find a fix for it, and then using a software update mechanisms, you basically repair those issues.
Okay, but in your voice, I'm not hearing a sense of a national security threat or anything like that.
Not yet.
Okay. All right. So please introduce your organization and your perspective on this subject, and yourself.
Sure. I'm Catherine McCullough. I'm with the Intelligent Car Coalition. I'm the executive director, and we're actually a little bit different than the others up here. We're a not-for-profit group, a group of technology companies that are looking at policy in this space and what the government is doing and what regulators are doing and what Congress is doing to shape the space and to affect the solutions that folks are coming up with. We are pro-innovation, and we believe that technology holds a lot of the solutions to the challenges of technology.
Now, I have two questions for you.
Okay.
One is, I agree with you. I think technology does have the solution, but if sometimes we get conflicting technologies, such as the DSRC debate of open use of that spectrum or protecting the spectrum for DSRC. So I'd be interested in your position on that. But also, I think your organization just recently, like a week ago, took a position on an issue, and if you could share that, unless I'm completely mistaken, just recently, in the past 2 weeks or so.
We actually take positions on quite a few issues. So we're concerned with privacy, with security, we're concerned with data use, and the issue actually that was in the panel before us is a pretty big issue for us. We're concerned about NHTSA's regulatory power. We are interested in what they mean by voluntary guidelines and that kind of thing. Yeah, you saw the New York Times article. Is that what you're thinking about? Yeah. So we're very interested in how regulators and Congress and those other than the inventors and the innovators are acting in this space. And we just want to make sure that there's a balance and that the interaction is appropriate, and that there is a lot of industry and government collaboration so that we can have the best outcomes really for everybody.
Now, instead of collaboration, I think right now in the industry we have confusion. So privacy is, quite often a topic of conversation, and nobody seems to understand what the guidelines are, if there are any guidelines. Someone just told me that in Europe, He said, oh, we can only keep the data for 30 days. Someone else told me, no, that's not true. And of course, if you're GM right now, you better have more than 30 days worth of data because the government wants to look at it. Although I hear there are some of the investigators that have gone to GM, gone to the CIO. The CIO has gone to OnStar and said, you have to cough up that vehicle data for the investigators. Oh no, we are not going to share that data. I don't care who's asking for it because we are dead set to preserve customer privacy. Well, then maybe it's going a little bit too far. So are there any guidelines? Where does your organization stand on the privacy question? Do you have any guidance to your members?
That's a terrific question. First of all, we consider the privacy and data question not one question. We think that it's quite a few different questions. And I think that you'll see that a lot of these questions, for instance, around location-based services, around best practices for data retention and other things, have actually already been looked at in kind of the smartphone and the app ecosystem. And over there, the FTC, instead of NHTSA, is the regulator. And the FTC does something very interesting. They are an enforcer rather than kind of a top-down prescriptive regulator. And often in these situations with privacy, they'll say, okay, folks, you guys, you mobile app developers, why don't you go into a room, figure out some best practices. We'll draw a circle around those best practices that everybody agrees to. If you step outside of that, we'll enforce against you, but if you stay inside that, you're going to be in a safe harbor. And I think that that's one of the things that we ought to be thinking about when it comes to just technology in general. Will flexible approaches like that work for technology as it moves into other areas like transportation?
Okay, you opened the door to this part of the conversation, which is what can the automotive industry learn from the mobile industry? I think I hear that they may have solved it to some extent. So it looks like you want to chime in, Judith?
Do you want to go first?
Please solve it, Judith.
So I'm Judith Bitterly. I'm with AVG Technologies. We're the online security company for devices, data, and people. There are 186 million people who use our software every day from over 200 countries. So we've been in business 17 years, and we, I think, understand the technology space really well, especially as it revolves around security and privacy. So the reason that we ended up here and our interest in this space is we have a different view of these connected cars. We view them simply as smartphones on wheels with better stereo systems. And with our customers, we see the evolution of technology into everything, from houses to Fitbits to your car. So our interest is simply in making sure that our customers are safe online and that their privacy, they still have fundamental privacy when they go online, regardless of if it's the car or not. And so with the car, we're focused on the console, where you can download apps, do your banking, listen to Pandora, and we just want to make sure that they're using safe practices, regardless of phone or car. Now, with regard to privacy, that is something that is coming to the forefront of us because we see the practices so different from the technology space than what we're beginning to see in automotive. With technology, we've been at this now a long time, and fundamentally, we know with certitude that customers want to know three things. They want to know how secure is their data, they want to know what you're doing with that data, and they want to know how transparent you're being with that data. Earlier this year, we surveyed 10,000 people across the globe. 65% said these three elements are critical to a brand.
What about, I like to say, access and control as well?
Well, that goes back to, that's a great question, but that goes back to a fundamental question of who owns the data. And so I think that's the starting point in any conversation with a customer, is a clear understanding of who owns the data and then who has access to it. Now, a colleague of mine bought a Tesla a week ago, and their privacy practices are a little bit different, even though they come from technology, than what we're used to. Before he could drive it off the lot, he had to sign and agree to the privacy policy. If he didn't sign it, he didn't get the car. So there was, you sign it under our terms or you don't drive off.
That's not unusual. I like to call it the lack of privacy statement that you have to sign.
That is the lack of privacy statement, yes. Yes.
So I had to sign the same thing with my BMW, which I didn't realize I was signing. Actually, it was buried. And then when I went I went and dug it up later. I found out that they could use my vehicle data for whatever purpose they chose
Yes.
and share it with marketing partners and law enforcement.
Yes.
Which was, oh, great. Awesome.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, what about the data that's collected on your children who are underage? Legally, you can't do that. So what are they doing with that data, too?
So part of what I'm hearing and what you're saying is I'm hoping, actually, both of you, actually, that we've solved these problems. We have the benchmarks from the mobile space. All we need to do is bring it over into automotive. Now, the one reason why I would hesitate to say that, and I might shift this over to David, is that it's like a smartphone on wheels, except that we leave it out by the roadside overnight, or in the garage, or in a parking mall, a shopping mall parking lot, and we don't keep, we sell it to somebody else or turn it in. So when you said you download apps or conduct transactions, I'm not sure I want all my transactional details and my apps and my content in the vehicle. You know what I mean? I would want maybe in the cloud or on my mobile device, not necessarily in the car. I don't know what your thought is on that.
Yeah, so
I know David has some thoughts on this.
So before we go back to you, David, we did a survey recently. It was women who were dating, and over 60% of the women said they would rather lose their boyfriend than lose their smartphone. So I don't know what that says about the relationship. So with cars, it brings up a great point.
Did they ask the men?
Pardon?
Did they ask the men?
No.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. So with cars, what happens when you resell a car? What are the best practices for wiping the car clean? When I hand my smartphone down to a niece or nephew, it is wiped clean before I give it to them. So we just need to establish those practices and I think transfer them over. So David?
Yeah, one of the points that we've always made, everyone kind of says, right, so a car is very much like, and has attributes that are smartphone attributes, but cars have different attributes, and one concern is that if we start treating this vehicle just like it's a smartphone and using all of the same sorts of things associated with that, I think we're going to get ourselves into some trouble. Part of it is the fact that you do leave your car specifically in unattended places. I even give my keys to people who I don't know because that's the way that I have to valet park, right? So now maybe what we need to have now is that, it used to be the valet park key could start the car, but remember it couldn't get in the trunk. Remember the old days? Maybe the way it works is the valet park key says you can't access any of the infotainment or connected type of things, right? So there are some things that are different, from that standpoint, right? The other thing that I think is different is you have to look at what point are we going to look at the private information that is in your vehicle and the things that are tracked and start treating it the way we treat healthcare information. So there is a precedent for this, right? In healthcare, we have HIPAA and high tech, and they have a lot of very specific rules about exactly what happens if information is exposed, the privacy rules that you have to go through, all the way to the point of if your cell phone is actually storing healthcare information, it's considered a protected device, it's considered a medical device, and it follows medical device rules. So what happens if my car has my healthcare information, right? And here's a great use case for that. Imagine that if I get into an accident and I'm unconscious, that my front display can display my blood type, any drugs that I happen to be on because I'm unconscious for the EMT to be able to see. Is that information in my car? Is it in the cloud? How is it stored? If my car gets stolen, is that considered an event that is where I've lost data, so there's notification issues that have to occur? So, this is where cars are just kind of different. They're different things and will probably have to be protected more. The other concern I have about cars has to do with the panel before. So the panel before talked about reducing distracted driving. That means I'm not going to type in IDs and passwords to log into all the things I want my car to log into. So the car is going to do it automatically without me doing anything. Where are those credentials stored? Are they in my car? And if they are in my car, my bigger security worry more than you're going to stop my car, it's you're going to hack into the wireless network as you're driving next to me, hack into my car, steal all my IDs and passwords, and then log into my bank and steal all my money, right? So that is my bigger concern about security of the vehicle.
No, that's interesting that you brought up healthcare because I've been at some events where they talk about connected health and being able to make sure someone's taking their medications at the proper time so they don't have to keep coming to the hospital. You can see remotely if you're their caregiver that they're doing everything that they're supposed to do, which is all great until somehow that information gets into the hands of your health insurance provider or your life insurance provider, and they say, whoa, we had no idea this guy was in this kind of shape. We have to talk about these rates. So what about, and this is coming at you, Catherine, information not being used against a driver or a person? I think that's where we're at in the usage-based insurance space in the U.S. No one's talking about it being used against. The only thing is Progressive will let you test the module for 6 months, and then if you're in the 10% of drivers that are 10 times worse than everybody else, which is what the statistics show, they'll just tell you you're not going to work out in this program. But do you have a sort of perspective on data use?
Yeah, data use and privacy. Like I said, we could come up here with, dozens and dozens of scenarios that are all pretty intricate and all very legitimate questions. And that, again, is why over in kind of the tech privacy space, you have something called FIPS, Fair Information Privacy Principles. And they are designed to be a high-level set of guidelines that are very flexible and are adaptable to each of these questions around sets of best practices, usually. So, for instance, when you're talking about healthcare information, that is covered by HIPAA. When you're talking about children's information, that's covered by COPPA, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. And so you see in the privacy space, some things are covered by specific laws according to their function, and some are covered according to the status of like a minor. And then in between there, you have areas covered by industry best practices and that kind of thing, where it's usually a case where it's too flowing and it's too complex to be covered by one static regulatory structure, and that's where best practices come in and where FIPS come in.
I have a different perspective on the connected car, and I'd be interested in getting your viewpoint on that. And that is that if you put a modem in my car, and therefore are getting diagnostic data out of the car, wouldn't that create an obligation on your part if you were a car maker? Do you have any car maker members?
Nope.
Oh, you need to do something about that. So, I would think you, as the car maker, have an obligation to tell me when my brakes are failing. What do you think about that, and what are the implications of that scenario?
Well, I think you just brought up a liability scenario.
I did.
Yes. I think that that is one of the questions that comes with data. What is the responsibility with data when one person owns it? And I think that question is being explored in the GM scenario right now. There's a group who, it looks like they had certain information. It looks as though it was not shared. And, they are subject to liability, obviously. So it looks as though that scenario is covered by a civil liability scheme, if you will.
I'm assuming you have some members who are suppliers to the automotive industry?
We have ones that are partners with the automotive industry. So, for instance, AT&T, Verizon, AT&T is providing the connectivity for GM cars. When you're a supplier or a partner, very often, and not in every case, but very often, liability is taken care of through contractual arrangements. But it's another example of kind of the very complicated question of privacy. And we would argue why, looking at flexible regulatory structures where there's a lot of communication between industry and government and other stakeholders is really the way to go, because there are so many complicating factors when it comes to this merging of technologies that we're seeing among the automotive and the usual tech space.
Oh, I hate it when it comes to that. Oh, this is very complicated, right?
No, it's such a good Washington answer.
I hope we can conclude this panel when we get to the conclusion on the point of we very well understand the roadmap to a solution. I mean, do either of you have that feeling, since you both are kind of closer to the problem?
I think there are a few solutions. I mean, certainly technologies, as we said, are often solutions to their own challenges. Secondly, structures like FIPS should be looked at and see if they can be applied to the automotive space. But really, I think when we're talking about a nascent space like this, a developing space like this, especially one that has such terrific potential when it comes to safety, saving lives, reducing our carbon footprint, all of these wonderful societal benefits that you don't even necessarily see with a smartphone, but the enormous upside potential in terms of societal benefits, I think that we really all have an incentive to get everybody in a room to figure out how we can keep the innovators
Okay, speaking of which, are either of you talking to Gloria?
We talked a little bit last night, and I'm going to connect with her after this event.
Okay.
I do talk to Gloria.
All right, all right. There are other organizations, but I don't see them here, Gloria, so you get the spotlight on that one.
Roger, I'm concerned though we're mixing security and privacy a little bit, right? I mean,
All right, sort it out. You're the man.
well, I don't know if I'm the man, but we've talked a little bit about the fact that there's security and privacy associated with.
By the way, I was just coming back to you because you work actually for BlackBerry, so you have both perspectives simultaneously, do you not?
Thank you. Sure. I think of it in two ways, right? I mean, there's the valet that might hack your information, or the rental car guy. I mean, that one, I don't know about you guys, but that's something that comes up on a regular basis for us as well. And then
you
there's
mean where your phone, the car ingests all of your phone book and other information and your phone numbers?
Yeah, exactly.
And then it doesn't wipe when you drop the car off?
Exactly, right? But to me, there's a different relationship with my rental car company and the valet than there is with the car company that I bought the car from, right? I think that certain things can be solved and worked through with the OEMs. I think the OEMs do have active policy working groups, as well as engineering thought around
Okay,
how
so
to.
that's what I was going to come back to you about. What is the status of the point at which they've come to grips with, let's say, security first, and then we can talk about privacy second. Security. Where do you think the auto industry, since you work with almost every car maker on the planet, where are they at in terms of security? Problem solved? Still working on it.
I think it depends on the OEM that we're actually talking about.
Close?
I don't know that any OEM would suggest that it's problem solved. I think personally being an engineer, I'm impressed with certain OEMs to the extent that they've gone. I don't know, Rajesh, if you believe this as well. The extent that they've gone in terms of implementing security that is meant to protect
Can you and Rajesh
privacy.
comment on some best practices, maybe?
So best practices, again, from an engineering standpoint of view, as I mentioned, you can use different combinations of hardware protection, software protection, and best practices in your development life cycle. From hardware point of view, you can probably use the trust zone, which was developed by Global Platform and ARM together, which basically segregates the security portion and the normal use portion on the processor. You can use a secured boot so that you validate the software before you execute on it. On software side, you can use mandatory access control versions of Linux, which are security enhanced, that allows you to constrain the processes, what operations they can do on the resources and such. You can implement firewalls. Basically, you need to know what packets you're allowing in and out of your system, so you can do that. You can do fuzz testing, which is basically you manually try to crash your interfaces, wireless interfaces, Bluetooth interfaces, by injecting overloading the interfaces by putting packets out of sequence and such. You can do static and dynamic code analysis to identify if you have buffer overruns and such. These are all the best practices that you can bring into your development process to make sure that you have a system that's going to be much more secure than in other cases.
And that is what you're going to have a comment on this in 1 second. And that is what I've heard, that it is a layered approach. There are hardware and software implications. It's right down to the silicon level.
Exactly.
And you have a perspective for sure.
Well, but I think the one thing I wanted to add to what Rajesh said is that the OEMs are also under tremendous pressure in that, all of these systems need to actually be on at key on immediately, like within fractions of a second, right? And there's no smartphone, there's no system that actually is in existence that I know of that actually can do that, right? We want to be able to get it.
Sorry about that.
We want to get in the car, we want to throw it in reverse, and we want that backup camera to be on now, right? And it doesn't matter if we just left that car or if that car we drive once a month.
That wasn't a sneaky way of working Android into the conversation, was it?
Oh my goodness, Roger.
I'm sorry. No. No. I'm just teasing you there. But I think Android has some issues with starting up quickly, perhaps.
Potentially.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. So, is there anything else you wanted to add to on the security side of the conversation?
No, I mean, I think I've said my piece. I just think that they're very different things. They're so interrelated. And, I think sometimes we mix who the threats are.
Well, I just think it's important that I come away from it, if not the audience, that with a sense that we have this problem surrounded, and if not solved, we're working hard on it. Now, because we've got the federal government talking about wanting to put modules on vehicles to tax them, to make up for all the electric vehicles and the higher mileage vehicles, so we're not getting enough gas tax to take care of our infrastructure. And there's this other conversation about a DSRC connection to the car, which some would say would enhance security, others say would completely, increase vulnerability significantly. Now, Rajesh, you and I, just a week or so ago, were talking about the public key infrastructure and elements of DSRC that are intended to solve this problem. What do you think about this question? My thought is, I see some executives in the automotive industry running away from connectivity because of the fear of security violation, whereas I think wireless connectivity needs to be embraced to solve the problem. So what are your thoughts about that?
So I would agree that it's not the technology which is the problem. The issue is you need to use technology and deliver a compelling use case, a compelling user experience. You cannot fight technology. You need to use technology to enable people. One of the most compelling use cases of intelligent connected car is the ability to provide personalized services to the end consumers. So I agree. I think by deploying some best practices in the development processes, I think you can deliver some really compelling use cases and value proposition to the end
What about DSRC in particular? So Harman's in the process of moving more aggressively into advanced driver assist technologies, and of course your clients are pushing you into and you're trying to be a leader in the DSRC space. Is DSRC a threat or an opportunity?
I think it's all an opportunity. I think the next step is the advanced driver assist system, as you mentioned, basically the forward collision, the rear collision, the lane departure warning, the heads-up display. All these will lead to, again, then the V2V and V2I.
And how does the PKI work, the public key infrastructure?
So PKI is basically an encryption mechanism. So you have private keys and public keys, and then you basically sign your images using the public key, which is, again, hidden inside the silicon, could be hidden inside the silicon. So all the key, the secure operation that happens within the processor itself, so you don't let them go on the bus. So it's a very secure mechanism, and the keys typically used are pretty long, maybe 2 kilobits or something. So it's very difficult to hack with your regular computers and such. Maybe you can add more to that?
Yeah, well, so we all use PKI all the time, right? So HTTPS, right? When you guys do web banking, it's PKI, right? So it's currently unhackable. Right, and I don't say that about many things, right? But it's been around since the 70s, right? Bruce Schneier, who's a big security geek, always says the reason it's good is because you can trust the math, right? So it's not about the algorithm, but it's about the implementation, right? And so the issue becomes this whole concept of, right? So the reality is that for things to be very secure, it is kind of an annoyance that we have not gotten away from users having to interact in such a way that it's somewhat annoying. So the people who want you to, the folks who want to reduce annoyance, which would be the OEMs who say, I want this to be easy and straightforward, they want to move towards a less secure implementation. All the technology can be wildly secure, right? But my implementation, if the way the implementation works is is the way that I authenticate to the head unit is with a password, but I type it in once, and then it basically is stored there, so it can be replayed again and again and again and again. That's not the best implementation. Nice, I get to turn my car on, and it just does what it does, type of thing. Going the other way, it's more of the annoyance. Now, what I would recommend, if you want to really take a look at an interesting standard for this, is Apple just put out a document on how it is they secure the new iPhones and how the fingerprint scans are secured. And the way they have separated out their security modules within the i5 chip and all of those things is very, very impressive. They're actually taking seriously the concept of this phone has a lot of my stuff and it has to be secure.
Well, and a phone could help in the car as a credentialing vehicle. You know, I am who I am, and you know, there are security elements tied to the car, to the phone. I'm sure you have.
It could, right? So you know, so the concept is how do I identify myself as the driver, right? And so, and I don't want the guy who's the valet who gets in the car, or my kids maybe, or my wife maybe, to be able to know where it is I'm driving all the time. So the phone is a good way to do that. The problem becomes, do you create this two-class citizenry? Okay, hey, you can use my car because you have a really cool phone, and you can't afford a cool phone, so really you don't get all of the security capability associated with it. So it becomes a difficult, right? That's not a technology question, right? That's really a political question on, is an OEM gonna do that? Or do you just secure the expensive ones? It's the Cadillacs and the Mercedes that you secure, but if you buy the entry-level car, it's the one that you don't care about because it's bought by somebody young who doesn't really care about their privacy anyway. At least that's what everybody keeps telling me.
So in the last few minutes here, so I've waited till there's only a few minutes left because I know none of you wants to comment at length on this, but I think, well, I'm curious, if no one else here is, about what the implications of Google and Android are in the car. Now, if you go to industry events like I do, there's always like, oh, you know, it's insecure, there's no privacy, Google wants to, you know, Google's reading your email, you know, what are they going to do about what you're doing in the car, et cetera, et cetera. I want a more rational perspective on Google and Android coming into the car. What are the implications for security and privacy?
Thanks for asking, Roger.
Do you work with Google?
Yeah, all the time. You know, the way I think about it is this way. There's no doubt they're taking a very strong interest in automotive. That there's no doubt that there's the ability for them to monetize information from the driver, the passengers, the car itself. OEMs are wrestling with this and are working collaboratively with Google to understand the implications and develop a model that works for both parties. I trust that they will reveal that to us when they feel it appropriate. I'm trying not to use any weasel words, but I trust that. I think that Android offers automakers access to a group of applications development ecosystem, and I believe, and we've done it on numerous occasions, showcase to the world how you can do that in a secure and private automotive context. Again, as Rajesh mentioned, implemented appropriately with the right kind of protections and architecture around it. It absolutely is possible. It's not necessarily how you would implement it on a smartphone, though, right? It is different.
Careful response, successfully executed. Thank you, Derek.
Thank you, Roger. I was sweating a bit there.
David?
So again, it's two questions, right? Google in the car is not inherently insecure. If you trust Google, you trust Google, right? So the way it works, right? I use Gmail, and Google says, oh, by the way, we read your email and we only use it for this. And if I don't believe them, their answer is, well, then don't use my free email service. So Google in the car is fine, right? I'm like, all right, I'll decide what I want to share and what I don't want to share. Android in the car, that's an operating system. And
Well, it's not really an operating system.
well, that is true. It is something a little above,
Yeah.
right? And
That's a tweet.
And it is not, so I think Android has gotten a bad rap. It is not inherently in a insecure implementation. Google and Android have decided not to basically put boxes around developers and have said you can develop almost anything that you want to, right? And we don't do all the things that Apple does, right? Apple has said we're going to create a walled garden. We're going to create a separate language, right? Objective-C and now this new Swift, right, that will be developed. You have to sign up as a developer. We have to know who you are. You have to pay us money. You have to use our APIs. And oh, by the way, even when you submit it, we're going to look at what APIs you use. And if you don't use ones that we think are right, we're going to nuke you out of the store, and I don't really care about it. Android doesn't do that, right? That may be the inherently insecure thing, right? So maybe the Android implementation in a car is more of the Google model that says, well, hold on. If you would develop an app that runs in the head unit, you do have to follow rules. We are going to approve it. It's not going to be wild, wild west. And so I think it can be secure. I just don't, it's not Android that's insecure.
Rajesh, your perspective?
So Harman works with both Apple and Google. So consumers' lives revolve around their cell phones. So when they enter into the car, the best we can do or we should be doing is to make sure that their experience is seamless in the car as well with their smartphones. And the Google Gal and the CarPlay enables us to bring that kind of an experience into the car as well. Again, I think, as you mentioned, it's not the technology itself, it's the implementations. The implementations have to be secure. We need to make sure that we are taking all the right steps to make sure that the systems are secure, it's distraction-free, the data is protected. At the end of the day, I think the consumers need to know what data is being collected, what data is being shared, and what are you doing with that data. I think if you can create a really value proposition, a compelling value proposition for the end consumers, they would opt in.
Catherine?
I agree. I think that Google faces the same challenge that anyone bringing really any technology to any consumer, but especially in the car, faces, which is that you have to have a consumer at the end who is comfortable with whatever is going on, because they are going to be the ultimate judge and jury. And so that's another reason why I think it's in everyone's best interest to try to get it right from the beginning. I'm sure we're going to see different approaches. We're going to see a little bit of experimentation. You might see some self-selection among consumers who are willing to maybe risk more of their private information for more of a service or for some other kind of benefit that they perceive. But I think that that's just part of the way the marketplace works to a large degree. And I think that will shake itself out.
We did some survey work, and I meant to mention it at the beginning, but I'll mention it now, and found that people were willing to trade privacy for enhanced safety. That was one thing that they would universally trade off, safety in the car. But Judith, you get the final word.
Oh, wow.
Until Q&A, by the way.
It's no surprise the direction Google is taking. What our research tells us is that by 2020, there are going to be 50 billion connected devices, and several billion of those are going to be automobiles. We partner with Google, we partner with Apple, but Apple has the walled ecosystem. Google is going after the devices and the OEMs. So for us, they have been, they've been a great partner. They have rules that they abide by, and if there are issues, they tend to fix them along the way. So there you have it.
We like Google. Okay, now we have our Q&A, and we have a question right up front, and I can, only because I can see you, I can't see anybody else. Is there a microphone for this gentleman?
I can just speak up. Perfect. I'll take it. Thank you.
And please tell us who you are.
Yes, hi. So Jose Pellieri, I cover cybersecurity and privacy for CNN Money. And I've got two questions. One's for the ladies on the panel. It's about privacy, and the other's about security for the gentleman on the panel. The question about privacy I have is this. I've spoken to a few attorneys in the healthcare space, and they've told me that actually HIPAA doesn't really work for this sort of thing because it doesn't apply to everyone. It only applies to providers of some sort of medical service. And my car manufacturer isn't providing me a medical service, so they don't really have to protect my data. At least they've told me that. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, because it might be that HIPAA apparently doesn't apply to them and they can sell your data wherever they want. And then the question about security I have for the gentleman on the panel is, I recently wrote a few stories about how your car is a computer and it can be hacked, but as they turn into smartphones on wheels, we'll have a whole bunch of other problems we're going to deal with. Can you spot are there any red flags you've spotted, and are we headed down the right path? Are there any things that you can note now that must be paid attention to that aren't being paid attention to right now?
When it comes to HIPAA, I think that your lawyers are correct. I think it's one of those areas that is a very specific law for a very specific area. And some of these other areas are being looked at and taken care of by FIPS, by other methods. But I think that this is one area where there are still a lot of questions and where there's still a lot of work to be done. I think that our position is that as this work gets done, that there should be a lot of conversation about it and that it ought to be very collaborative in nature because these questions are complicated.
I agree with the collaborative in nature, but with regard to the data, even if there isn't a law, there is a distinct impact to the business. If you have a breach of data security, you have a human right to notify the person that the data has been breached, and you also have a legal responsibility. Think about Target and the damage that's been done to their brand by not being great stewards at that time of the data. So if legal doesn't cover it, it will definitely impact your business if you have to send out a notification to 50 million of your customers that their data was breached. So that's kind of the cause and effect. One of the things that we're looking at doing with all of our apps, though, is really making it clear. We're looking at putting a nutritional label, for lack of a better word, so that when someone buys or downloads an app, we disclose fully in a very simplified format the data we're collecting and how we're using it, and then they can hyperlink to other things. But we're trying to be transparent and we're trying to make it easy.
Maybe I'll start with your with your question. I mean, the one thing I'd like you to leave here with is the fact that, and I'm not trying to take Judith on in this at all, I don't think of the car as a smartphone on wheels, right? And the reason I say that is that the car is actually a network of computers, many computers, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 computers. They're all of varying competencies. Some can do complex computing, some are very simple computers. But it's really a network, and most of those computers speak to one another in the car. It's how companies like Harman actually make some of the magic happen when we get into the car. So, you know, as I think about it, you know, does more need to be done? Yeah, absolutely. We can do more. We have to work with the OEM community. We have to work with consumers to figure out what they're going to accept in terms of how much we actually lock things down.
Any one or two points of high threat that, you know, come to mind that worry you? I think that was the question. Like one or two areas, like these need attention right away. These areas. He paid me to follow up on that.
Once again, thank you, Roger. A lot of the information transfer in vehicle is on an architecture called CAN. That architecture, for better or for worse, is quite obscure to most people that are outside our industry. You know, I see it as something that we need to look at more closely. David?
So as part of my role in the company's chief security officer is actually to secure our cloud platform. And I can tell you right now, one of the requirements of every single one of my customers is my back-end network servers cannot be wirelessly connectable. It all has to be wired. And the reason is, if you want to hack my back-end server, you got to get into the cage, right? You got to touch it. My big concern is this: in the vehicle space, in order to A, save money, B, make it more convenient, we're getting more and more wireless types of connectivity, right? Those are the things, right? We all remember Stuxnet, right? You know, type of thing, right? Those infected little PLC modules with had hardly any code at all in them, right? If you can't connect to my vehicle at all without touching it, I'm much more secure. Because if what you want to do is kill me there, you can just cut my brake lines if you can touch my vehicle. But if you can connect to my vehicle on an overpass as I'm driving by, even though there's gobs of technology, someone will find some way around one of those implementations that does something that does something.
Does anybody have a quick yes or no question, since we're just about out of time?
Ivan Berger, freelance journalist and writer. What I have is not a question, actually, but a comment. You referred to the manufacturer's liability or responsibility if it knows your brakes are failing to notify you. That doesn't have to be a connected car issue at all. If the manufacturer will only know the brakes are failing if the car knows the brakes are failing. In that case, it's the manufacturer's responsibility to have the car tell you directly. My 2004, which is not connected, does that. A little light comes on, says brake. And then you take it in for service.
I guess I'm thinking more of a more comprehensive condition-based maintenance system that, is more than just idiot lights in the dashboard. But yes, you're right. There are some, basic things that can be provided for. So please thank the panel. We've used up our time and yours.
Roger Lanctot, thank you, sir.